What is going on, y'all? What is going on, y'all? What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again with the Cave. Do you want the easy, the medium, or the hard?
I told myself coming on, I'm taking all the hards.
You what?
Just give me the hard part.
30.
God, I forgot about the wager. I would have played the game completely different.
It's not the Ravens.
Who is it? Who is it?
It is actually the Eagles.
Oh, Jalen Hurts!
Yeah, Shirley had 105. Yep.
I'll wager a 30 point.
It's going to be hard for you to blow this. Respective draft classes, who was selected higher, Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre?
Rodgers.
What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again with the Cave every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We take to the airwaves on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook to talk about the NFL, the recent takeaways, the reactions, our thoughts. In Week 15, a lot of people are deeming it one of the craziest weeks in NFL history, which I think is a little bit of a stretch to an extent. But with that being said, it was a very wild one, and I can't wait to break it all down. And today I got another very special guest, as I always do each and every week. And he is a very, very smart man, and I'm excited to really pick at his brain tonight. Arjun, thank you for taking the time to join me. He's a PFF analyst. He does a lot of stuff on the back end with PFF. We were talking prior to the show. And, like I said, very smart guy, and I'm excited to pick at his brain tonight and, hear some thoughts on the NFL. So thank you for joining me, man.
Yeah, first of all, really appreciate you having me on. I got to say, you probably have the best intro to a show podcast that I think I've ever seen, like, whether it's YouTube or just a general like Spotify, Apple podcast. So that's definitely something really cool. Definitely something you should be proud of. And again, really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course, man. I'm really looking forward to chopping it up. Like I said, so much to really break down, and this could probably turn into a 4-hour thing. But I'm gonna try and spare your time on this fine Tuesday night. But we'll kick things right off. We're gonna get into the recent news that has been going down in the NFL. Some big headlines. I call this the recent cave paintings. And we'll start with the first big headline, and this is not really in chronological order, just based on what I feel is important and pertinent. But Jalen Hurts apparently has a sprained shoulder. Gardner Minshew is set to start. The lines came out. There was some suspicion when the Cowboys were favorited originally when the lines were released, and then it went from -1 to -3. And then it went to -5 around the same time that it was heard that Jalen Hurts supposedly broke his collarbone, which then turned into a shoulder sprain. And there have been mixed reports from what I've been seeing. It's maybe it's his left shoulder, it's his throwing shoulder. Obviously, the rumors about his collarbone. How do you gauge the news we've been getting here? Do you think it's a little bit more severe than the Eagles are leading on?
No, I do think I would say just a sprained shoulder. Doesn't seem like he will be out for a month or longer than that. I do foresee him at least being back for the playoffs. Hopefully he is back in the regular season, because it will be tough for him to kind of miss a whole month, hop into the divisional round and play your first game in a whole month. But yeah, when the lines opened up on Sunday night and I was looking at, Cowboys are favored by 1, I'm like, that pretty much means Vegas thinks, or thought, I thought Vegas thinks both those teams are equal on a neutral field, which I kind of understand. Cowboys maybe have the quarterback advantage with Dak, even if Jalen's playing at an MVP level this year. But when it moved to -2.5, and nothing that came out, this is before a Rappaport tweeted, this is before Schefter released anything. I'm like, okay, there's some significant money coming in that people think Hurts isn't going to play. And then we see the reports. And yeah, in this game, I really like the Eagles. If Hurts was going to play, I would have bet them to win straight up. And I'm sure we'll talk about like underdog stuff later, but I still think they're a competent team with Gardner Minshew, who I think a lot of people do underrate as a quarterback.
Yeah, we're talking about probably one of, if not the best backup in the NFL. Off the top of my head, I really can't think of anybody that has stepped in consistently and done a pretty sufficient job for especially the Eagles. Obviously, he made his come up over in Jacksonville, but Gardner Minshew's always been, very good when he stepped in, to be frank. And it never seems like the teams he steps in for really take a drop off. I think it was against the Jets last year when he stepped in. And he seemed to really, I remember that was when Dallas Goedert I think it was his career game, Dallas Goedert's, at least one of them. He really liked his tight ends. The offense was moving up and down the field pretty seamlessly. So I think even with Gardner Minshew, this is a game that the Cowboys, especially the way that they've been playing lately, can't brush off their left shoulder. So it'll be an interesting one. And going back on the point of the Hurts injury itself, I just found it odd. Like, where could the news of the collarbone have come out for it then to be released that it's a sprained shoulder, but nobody knows which shoulder? I feel like there's something going on here that we just don't know yet. I guess time will tell with that. I would assume that, I don't know. I mean, a shoulder sprain to me sounds like something he can be back for after this week. But if it's something he's held out for more than that, but then there's no future timetable given, I don't know. There's just something fishy about this whole thing to me that I feel like they're not really leading on at the moment, but that's just my inkling. All right. So the second piece of recent news that I wanted to touch on, which, I mean, there's just so much we could talk about, but these are the biggest ones. And the Rams being eliminated from playoff contention, I felt like was relatively, big news. We're talking about a Super Bowl champion that has now been, retired from the postseason the following year. And apparently, I think it was the 98 Broncos or something.
Yeah.
What year? Something 98 Broncos or something along those lines. They tied them for the quickest playoff elimination after their Super Bowl season, which, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Of course, the injuries being the biggest of all of them. But do you think overall, my biggest question to you would be, would the Rams, the way they mortgaged everything for their future, was ultimately worth the championship, in the end?
Yeah. I think if you're able to just mortgage 3-4 years of your future for one championship and you're able to win it, I think that is the ultimate goal. You're supposed to win a championship. Very few franchises are able to do that consistently. And even if the Rams will be bad for the next couple of years, the fact that they were able to pull off the championship the way that they did last year, I think whatever they did, the moves they made, trading for Stafford, trading for Jalen Ramsey, it all culminated into a Super Bowl. So while I do think that strategy of team building, the way of mortgaging draft picks, not caring about early picks, paying your stars a bunch of money and building a super top heavy roster, while I do think that process is unsustainable, it's not something that can be replicated. Well, it can be replicated, but the success rate is going to be extremely low because everything has to go right for you. I don't blame the Rams for doing it, and I think it was in my opinion, bad process, good result. But again, like in the NFL, you do need to have a little bit of luck, and I think a lot of things went the Rams' way throughout the season, and especially when they hit the playoffs.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would argue that neither of those teams, at least in the big game itself, looked like they actually belong there. Just because you expect a much smoother product from both of those football teams, and it just didn't seem like that was the case. And that speaks to the point you were making, where it just sometimes it takes some luck. I think the Bengals, to an extent, lucked their way up to that point, and the Rams were one Jaquiski Tartt drop from being eliminated themselves. So we saw two football teams that I think definitely, found their stroke of luck, and the Rams, doing as much as they could to get there, ultimately were able to come out on top. It's just one of those things where the answer for me was 100% yes right after the fact. And then this season, of course, factors that are unrelated to their future have played into how bad they've been. But, I feel like if we're talking about a playoff drought that lasts maybe 11 to 12 years, then I think the conversation really starts, like, how much worth it truly was it? Or maybe how long, being a playoff team is one thing, but then being a conference contender or a Super Bowl contender. I mean, I guess to an extent, if we're reaching a timetable of, 10 to 15 years, then maybe the conversation starts of, was it truly worth it? Do you think that's a fair way to go about it?
Yeah, I do think that is a fair way of approaching it. But like, I think it comes down to what ownership values and also what, the GM's kind of like team building philosophy is. So like, if the owner is okay with selling your soul for one Super Bowl, being mediocre for the next 5 to 10 years, then it's okay to approach it in that way. I don't, fault anyone. And again, we as fans, outsiders, like, we don't really have any insight into like how these things come about. I think Les Snead has been pretty publicly he's publicly kind of said he doesn't really value draft picks as highly, or at least the early round draft picks. But yeah, I think if we revisit this in 10 years and the Rams are like a sub 400 team over the past 10 years, I think there might be some discussion about whether or not it was worth it. But as of right now, within the next couple of years, like to me, it doesn't really matter because they were able to accomplish what they set out to do, which is win a Super Bowl. And the moves they made helped them get there because I know, at the time, people during the Stafford trade, there were two sides of the coin where it's like, Matthew Stafford, like how much is he, first of all, even an upgrade over Jared Goff, which was, I didn't really understand that discussion. And two, like, how much does he improve this offense, which we saw was a lot, right? So the moves they made worked out the way they thought it would. And, again, winning a Super Bowl is the ultimate goal. And the fact that they were able to accomplish that, I think, kind of makes everything else irrelevant, at least for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I can wholeheartedly agree with that. And as much as we sit here and say, oh, they could not be a playoff team for 10 years, they can easily be back in the conversation in 4 to 5 years with some solid, with a couple of hits, maybe in the second, third to fourth rounds over the next few years. I mean, just because you don't have a first doesn't mean you can't build up some solid depth using what you do have. So, I mean, I just think with this football team, the core is probably leaving. I don't know if Sean McVay is going to be retiring by the time all those guys do depart, go their separate ways. I think he kind of talks out of his ass sometimes, but I think Sean McVay's future there is a very integral part, obviously, to that Rams' future success. So just something to keep an eye out for, because I feel like this conversation can vary based on how it plays out over the next few years. Well, the next piece of recent news we have talk about history and things that were not evil. The Colts blew a historic lead, and we all saw it with our own two eyes. And if you didn't, you probably heard all about it and then read about it on your Twitter timeline. This was nuts. I mean, for the first half, we were watching a historic meltdown by a 10-3 football team. And then by the second half, it started out poorly for the Vikings as well. I'm pretty sure the Colts, responded to the Vikings 3-and-out coming out of half with 3 points. If I'm not mistaken. And then from that point on, it was just all Minnesota. As this game progressed, I had it in the back of my mind, like, it's possible, but the time is going to screw them, especially when they started to catch, when they started to gain momentum. It was one of those things where you could just tell the Colts didn't have much offensive juice going for them. And if the Vikings made a couple of stops, then maybe they can make it close. But watching this game, what were your thoughts? What do you think about the Vikings? Just break it all down for me.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Colts offense didn't really do anything, in my opinion. They got stalled in Vikings territory fairly often, kicked, I think, like 4 or 5 field goals. The punt return and the pick six, or the punt block and the pick six, were kind of what buoyed the Colts to go up 33-0. And look, I know Kirk Cousins was kind of like the guy. He's obviously the quarterback for the comeback. I think we have to take into account that while he does have a ton of great passing stats from that coming out of that game, and he did make some fine throws, a lot of that came against Gus Bradley, who likes to run a lot of prevent coverages, a lot of the cover 3 when playing up double digits. And that's all he gave Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins, to his credit, found the open guy, made some great throws. The one stat I think is really funny from this game. So what the Colts ran the second most plays all season with a 95% win probability or higher. So, based on the direction of the game, the score differential, the time, they had a 95% win probability or chance to win for a large majority of that game. And the Colts and the Vikings ran 54 plays within the time span of the Colts having a greater than 95% chance to win that game. And before this week, any teams or group of teams that had run more than 50 plays, with a chance to win of 95% or more, were 106-0 before this game. And so, just like your title says, this was not just a loss; it was a historic loss that shattered a bunch of bad records that you don't want to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, my God, it was just like you said. And how you allude to Kirk Cousins is, something I enjoy, because I've been known to be a very large Kirk Cousins hater. Throughout the offseason especially, it's kind of died down because now he's coming off of back-to-back 400-yard passing games. And, Justin Jefferson's an MVP candidate. He's the one throwing him the ball, blah, blah, blah. But, like you mentioned, Kirk wasn't – I didn't think he was excellent in this game. I thought he played the quarterback position about as well as he needed him to. against a fairly, not too tough defense in the second half.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned, Gus Bradley really didn't make it difficult for Kirk. And once Justin Jefferson was winning his matchups with Stephon Gilmore, then the momentum really started to pick up. So, and KJ Osborne, credit to him, one hell of a game that KJ had. I did not see that coming for a almost 200-yard performance for him. But yeah, I think, Kirk Cousins is a guy that performs to a level you need him to, but he's not going to win you a football game. And despite this historic comeback, did he win them the game? Yeah. But then again, I think the Vikings defense continuously, causing the Colts to go 3 and out or 1 first down and then punting. I think the Vikings defense had a lot more to do with this than Kirk's, pretty solid efficiency going up the field. I don't know. It was crazy nonetheless. And speaking of crazy losses, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this one. I was watching this live. I don't know if you caught it when it actually happened, but my God, was this worse than what the Colts experienced? Do you think?
No, I still think the Colts worst was lost because if you're a Colts fan, you have to be thinking, okay, we got this in the bag. The Patriots were playing from behind, came back, and actually, that's really close because the Patriots were on the wrong side of a really bad call. I think was it Keelan Cole. It looked like his foot was out on that one touchdown right before the lateral touchdown. But yeah, no, I still think the Colts is worse because it feels like they had that in the game or had it in the bag. But yeah, this is just like I don't know what Jacoby Myers was doing. Like again, from the outside, we don't know what the play call was. We don't know what the coaches told them to do. But that, I'll be honest, I was watching the Chargers Titans game.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just seen Justin Herbert make this crazy throw that I'm sure everyone has seen at this point. And, I go on Twitter after the Chargers make the field goal and everyone's like, oh my God. And I thought they were talking about Justin Herbert because I do root for Herbert. And instead they're talking about this crazy play that happens in the Patriots Raiders game. And I panned to that game and I'm like, wow, what just happened? So yeah, it was wild. I don't think I've ever really seen an offense lose on the last play of the game like that. And so yeah, that was wild. I do feel bad for the Patriots and for Patriots fans.
Yeah, I mean, that was I just couldn't believe what I was watching. I had to look down at the score when I saw Ramondre initially lateral it. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And I don't know if you know the pick aside guy, or no, it wasn't pick aside. It was the Stay Hot guys. I think it was Bladen that said it, but I think what he said was, I think Jacoby just saw Ramondre lateral it, and he's like, okay, I guess we're lateraling. So he decided to follow Ramondre's lead. Like, I just don't understand what could have possibly triggered that thought process. And some people were blaming coaching to an extent. I don't even think this was a conversation that was had. Like, I feel like there's no game plan here. It's just an obvious situation to get out of where they were. They were running the ball purposefully to run the clock out. If they scored, they scored, but it was just to run the ball to lower the risk factor of potentially losing in regulation. I mean, I just don't see a reality where Belichick or Patricia or anybody on that coaching staff is saying, hey, look, we're going to try a lateral, or he's addressing, I don't know. I just don't think this could be a coaching error. I think it was just a blunder that players got caught up in the moment with. And that's it. I just don't know how a coach could even address this. What do you shouldn't have to tell NFL players, don't lateral it on this play. That's just my thought process on it. Yeah, that play made a lot of people's night.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think the funniest thing that come out of that game was Belichick saying Mac Jones couldn't throw a 55-yard Hail Mary, which again, like, first round quarterback can't make that throw, then like kind of speaks to like how we're gonna project the rest of his career to go, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Do you actually think, I mean, obviously we could take Bill Belichick's word for it, but you really think that Mac Jones with a set platform couldn't make that? I mean, I find it hard to believe he couldn't make it to the end zone. I mean, I don't think Belichick would lie about that, but I don't see why they wouldn't throw the Hail Mary if he could make that throw. I mean, the risk is lower for that. Like, true.
I guess maybe the Patriots don't have like that jump ball guy, but like even then, like we've seen guys like Randall Cobb catch Hail Marys and they're under 6 foot, right? Like you don't need to be the tallest in these kind of scenarios. A lot of it is kind of luck. So
yeah, very. Yeah, the Patriots are in a sticky situation right now, and we'll get to that in a little bit because I do have a question regarding them. But as of right now, we're going to move on from the recent cave paintings, and we're going to get into the over the fire segment, which, as I kind of alluded to prior to the show, I'm going to give you a couple of people, topics, teams, scenarios. You're going to tell me cooked or uncooked, and we're going to start with the first cooked or uncooked candidate, the over the fire. And that's the Baltimore Ravens offense. Is that cooked, or what do you think? Is it uncooked?
Yeah, I think without Lamar, it's cooked. Just Tyler Huntley. I think he is one of the better backups in the league, but I don't think he's the type of guy to elevate a supporting cast of Devin Duvernay, Demarcus Robinson, and I mean, I don't even know if Sammy Watkins really changes anything in that offense. Mark Andrews is great, but even then, like once teams know he is the guy, they can key in on him. The run game has been good. J.K. Dobbins is, kind of added some burst to that running back room, which is, kind of not been that great this year. But I think they're definitely cooked without Lamar. Even if Lamar comes back, I don't like he was playing amazing with Rashad Bateman. And once Bateman got hurt, it did seem like the offense was trending downward. So I'm going to go with cooked as of right now. It's kind of an unknown for me when Lamar comes back, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say with Lamar, what would your answer be? Do you think, or where would you lean more toward?
I would still say uncooked because I think Lamar is the most dynamic quarterback in the game, so he kind of covers up for a lot of deficiencies that the offense has with his legs, and I think they can lean into a more ground heavy attack with him. So I would say uncooked with Lamar, but I don't think the infrastructure is there to support Tyler Huntley.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, the weapons are pretty lackluster. Devin Duvernay is actually on IR too, so I mean that was probably next to Bateman their next best receiver, and now he's done, at least most dynamic, and he's done. So this offense is about as depleted as it gets. And I would, two questions regarding this. The first one, actually, how much do you think this is on Greg Roman? Do you think Greg Roman holds this offense back, or do you think he actually elevates it in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest scheme guy. So yeah. I do kind of like use wisdom of the crowds here because I don't think Roman has done a good job developing a passing game. The passing schemes, the plays don't really seem to work. It's a lot of Lamar creating it for himself. I will give him a lot of credit for establishing a pretty dominant running attack, especially when Lamar Jackson is healthy. The kind of read options, zone read type of stuff that the Ravens like to run, the inverted veers. I think the Ravens run that very well when their offensive line is healthy. They, can kind of dominate the line of scrimmage with guys like Ronnie Stanley also healthy. So yeah, I do partially blame Greg Roman for not being able to like put together a passing attack, but then also like it's tough to blame him because he's not. I mean, when Bateman's out and you don't have like the front office hasn't really brought in any like alpha wide receiver ones to kind of support him. It's tough to like put that much blame on him, but it's been 4 years now with Lamar. Like I think, or 5 years. Like I feel like at this point you should have like an idea of like how to utilize his arm and kind of like build a good passing attack around him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's like this weird like on the fence feeling where I almost feel like Lamar wouldn't be the Lamar we know without being in the Greg Roman run heavy creative system. But at the same time, Lamar is not really, I think Lamar individually has matured as a passer over the past few years tenfold, truthfully. But in terms of being put in a positive situation that elevates, and puts, Lamar's passing ability and, utilizes it correctly, I think that's where Greg Roman fails, like you said. So it's a weird balance that I have in my mind with that offense right now. And my second question to you, which you kind of already touched on, would have been, do you think the front office kind of failed this team in general? I mean, I thought the Ravens were going to be an AFC contender. And right now, despite the record, they're not looking like anything like a playoff team. So I think the front office failed it. Do you think this is a lot to do with that?
Yeah, I think failed is maybe a strong word. I think they've done a good job kind of like building the team overall. This is what, like, they're always a contender every year, at least a playoff contender. They're going to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
Whether they go far, I think, is obviously a different question. But I do think they could have invested more resources into the receiving room. I would guess that part of the reason they didn't do that is because obviously, like with Lamar, you might have more success running the ball than passing the ball. But I think in the long term, like, you want to be able to lean into Lamar's arms rather than his legs, because that will allow him to take less hits, put him out of harm's way less often. And so I wouldn't say it was a failure, because I mean, again, they've always been, winning with Lamar. They've always like had a good contending team, but I do think they could have made some changes to like how they approach the offense and receiver room in specific.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Failure probably was a strong word. We just see it for what it is now because Bateman got hurt. I mean, this conversation probably isn't being had if Bateman isn't hurt. If Lamar doesn't struggle with, staying healthy now, they just didn't account for the worst case scenario. I think out of every player on that team outside of Lamar, Bateman probably was the biggest loss they could have suffered. And now we're seeing the consequences they're suffering. So you make a fair point, probably a little bit harsh. But the next over-the-fire candidate we got here is Zach Wilson's permanent starting role in New York. He's starting again because Mike White's hurt. But, let's say when Mike White's healthy again, do they go back to Zach Wilson? Do you think there's a chance Mike White's done?
Yeah, I do think his role with the Jets is cooked this year. I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say he's done as their starter for like the rest of his rookie contract, but it's pretty obvious that the Jets are just a better offense with Mike White. Like, and I know Zach Wilson played a tougher stretch of defenses earlier in the season, and Mike White's like not played that hard of a defense, but Zach Wilson's really kind of held this offense back. When he playing the Lions, like, that is not a good defense. And the thing with the Lions, like, they're going to give you a lot of stuff down the field, but they're also going to like allow a lot of stuff underneath. And so Zach Wilson in this, in the game against the Lions, his average depth of target was 15. Like, that is an absurdly high number.
Yeah.
On average, he's throwing the ball 15 yards down the field, which, again, like, the Lions defense is not that good, so you can take advantage of it, which he did multiple times. But he also was super inaccurate on some throws, and because he was forcing the ball down the field. So I think Mike White gives you a better chance to win. I definitely think Zach Wilson has a higher ceiling because of his arm. But at this point, if you're the Jets, you shouldn't be chasing a quarterback ceiling. You should be, chasing their floor and their average. And I think Mike White is higher because he's not putting the ball in harm's way. He's kind of like asking what you ask him or what you want him to do. And your defense is going to win you games, not your quarterback. And I think Zach Wilson is kind of like actively not letting them do that.
Yeah, I think so too. It's very clear the difference in offense that we see from this team when Zach Wilson's commanding it. I think there were a couple of throws that Zach Wilson made, and he just in the pocket, left hash mark, throwing deep down the field to the right side, and he's just kind of flicking his arm. I'm like, wow. I mean, the arm talent is clearly there. It's just such a mental thing with him, it seems like. And like you said, you don't want to be chasing the ceiling, especially at this point in the year. We saw the Dolphins fall victim to this when Brian Flores was still there and trying to force Tua. When Ryan Fitzpatrick was clearly the guy that was probably going to rally them to the postseason and give them their best chance, and Flores was just forcing Tua. They think Tua's going to be it. He's going to work. When in reality, they probably should have stuck with Fitzpatrick if they wanted to give themselves the best chance. And this is a similar situation. And I do think Robert Saleh realizes that, although I guess we'll see. But right now, Pokemon says, does Zach even want to play? I don't know. Zach doesn't strike me as a very guy. He doesn't lead, I guess, for lack of a better term. He doesn't seem like a guy that rallies troops together, that can get a team, get an offense going. And I don't know. It just doesn't seem like he strikes me as that personality either. So, it's also a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, again, from the outside, kind of like talking about these locker room type things. But yeah, some based on some of the comments we've seen in the media, some of the things they've said to report is it does seem like the players like playing with Mike White a little bit more, or think he's a better option for the offense. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to really speak on like Zach's like commitment to football or commitment to the team, but I would still say Mike White is the better quarterback, at least for this year.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree, especially with the way that they've looked as of late. But next up for the next over-the-fire candidate, this one is pretty fresh. Jalen Hurts MVP hopes. You think they're cooked or uncooked?
Yeah, they're cooked. I personally don't even think he should have been the favorite at any point in the season. Mahomes is playing on another level this year, and I'm back from college in California. The last bet I placed in Michigan, where it's like legal to play stuff on like legal books, was Patrick Mahomes to win MVP at like plus 200, and I think it's moved to minus 300, or it's moved to him being the odds-on favorite. So I definitely think it's cooked, especially if Hurts just kind of just sits the rest of the regular season. Mahomes has a pretty not that tough of a schedule. I know he plays the Broncos again, but he'll also get the Raiders. He will probably have chances to kind of close out the season with a bang. And as he's kind of battling, as the Chiefs and Bills are battling for the 1 seed. The Chiefs will rely on him like they have all season to kind of like make the plays that is necessary for him to make for the Chiefs to win. And statistically, he's near the top in almost every important passing category. So I would definitely say he is the MVP and Hurts isn't.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said. I never thought prior to Tua's poor stretch, I put out a take that, I don't think that Tua and this might have even been stretching it, but at the time, I didn't think Tua or Jalen Hurts were top 5 MVP candidates. I didn't, I of course wasn't upset if you put them in there because everybody was at the time, but just because of the situation that they're both in, they're both in positive situations for, systems that pretty much boost them up to where they probably would be in a pretty average spot. It's just, to me, an MVP is a player that a team can't go without. They're not winning games without. Of course, we'll see now with Gardner Minshew starting how they do against the Cowboys. I don't think this necessarily diminishes what Jalen Hurts has done, but it'll kind of just speak to the narrative of how good this roster truly is. So that'll be interesting to see. And Tua has just kind of naturally fallen out of the race because he's, been figured out to an extent. Mm-hmm. But like you said, Patrick Mahomes has been otherworldly for pretty much the entire year. That game against the Broncos, I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback throw 3 interceptions, 3 pretty poor picks, if we're being honest, yet still put on highlight reel after highlight reel throw. Mm-hmm. It was one of the best games from a 3 interception quarterback that I've seen in my life. And that just speaks to how good he's been playing this year. And even having this struggle against the Texans, he was still making insane play time and time again. And he's been the clear and above favorite, in my opinion. And the only person that I think was close to him was Josh over the first 1 to 5 weeks. But then after that, of course, between Josh's injury, Josh's poor decision-making, he's fallen out naturally too. So, with that being said, I completely agree. I don't think Hurts was even touching Mahomes in that regard at all. And speaking on the Chiefs, actually, my final cooked or uncooked candidate is going to be this. The Chiefs are a top 2 NFL team as of right now. Is that cooked or uncooked?
I think as of right now, I think that's uncooked cooked. I think that's right, that the Chiefs are a top 2 teams. Would that be cooked or uncooked?
Uncooked. Yeah.
Uncooked, yeah. I think I wouldn't feel opposed to saying they're the best, honestly. I think the Bills have the better team, but Mahomes is just playing on a level we haven't seen him play before. The one issue I have with the Chiefs is their defense is really bad. Davis Mills had a pretty solid game against them. And they just really haven't been able to stop anyone. I mean, Russell Wilson, for as bad as he looked all season, threw for 3 touchdowns against them, right? So I have a little bit of worry about their defense in the playoffs, that if Mahomes has one off game, that could just be it. Whereas like the Bills or the Bengals, like if Burrow or Allen have an off game, like you can kind of reliably think that their defense would be able to hold up in a single game. Whereas the Chiefs, I don't think they have the guys on the outside. I don't think they can stop the run well enough to kind of prevent these lulls from Mahomes, even if that doesn't happen that often. We kind of saw like the Bengals defense carried Burrow in this past, or I wouldn't say carried Burrow, but they gave him favorable situations to work with against the Buccaneers. Like, Josh Allen, when the Bills played the Jets 2 Sundays ago, that similar thing happened, held the Jets to 12 points. I don't think the Chiefs defense is capable of that. And, while you can rely on Mahomes to play at an MVP level for an entire season, all it takes is one bad game in the playoffs and capiche.
Yep, wholeheartedly agree once again. I mean, this team is this defense is looking probably about as bad as we've seen it in the Mahomes era. This guy is, he's not going to throw for 50 touchdowns, but he might have to if they want a chance at the 1 seed by the end of the year, the way this defense has been going. And, these AFC West matchups, they have 2 left out of the 3 weeks, and they get tough for this Chiefs team. It seems, historically over Mahomes' tenure, they struggle to take down AFC West teams with a good grasp. And, I think the Raiders almost beat them earlier in the year. Obviously, the Broncos just gave them a run for their money. They always play the Chargers hard. Last year, Drew Lock and the Broncos almost, kind of upset the Chiefs at the end of that season. So these last 2 out of 3 games are not going to be easy. It's going to require Mahomes to play at this level that he's been playing at. But like you said, I mean, it's just such a poorly constructed, poorly performing team, I'll say. Any given week, this guy doesn't play to this capacity, and they might be an outside top 5 team if we're being honest. So I guess we'll see if that ever happens. But as of right now, I think saying they're top 2 is still a reasonable take. I agree. All right, so we'll move on. We're going to get into the next segment, which is just the regular Q&A segment, and we're going to start with the first question that I have for you. And going back on the MVP conversation, because I want to pick your brain about this a little bit more. Outside of Mahomes, who would be your top 3 MVP candidates at the moment?
Yeah, outside of Mahomes, I mean, I at this point, I would still put Jalen Hurts second. I think statistically has been tremendous this year. The value he adds in the run game is kind of unmatched by any quarterback except for Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields. I do think he has maybe the best infrastructure to work with the best offensive line in the league, one of the best wide receiver duos in the league, a very smart coaching staff that, is analytically driven, puts him in good situations, knows when to run the ball, knows when to pass the ball. But still, I would put Hurts as my first MVP candidate outside of Mahomes. This one's going to be interesting. I would go Justin Jefferson at 2 because I don't know. I just don't know what the Vikings offense would do if Kirk doesn't have Jefferson. Yeah. He commands so much respect from opposing defenses. And even then, even when he's getting doubled, even when teams put their number 1 corner on him, I don't think he's stoppable. I think he's the most uncoverable receiver in the league in single man coverage. The only bad game he had was against the Lions in week 3, but in that game he was bracketed and doubled 14 out of the 30 something routes he ran. So again, he's a very tough receiver to stop, and he adds more than any other receiver, I think, in my opinion, to their offense, because even if you take away Tyreek, you still have Waddle, but if you take away Jefferson, you're throwing to old Thielen, right? You're throwing to TJ Hawkins, and I think there's a big drop off there. And number 3, I would go with Josh Allen. I know he kind of has had a lull in the midseason playing some tough defenses like the Jets, but he is the offense. There is maybe no quarterback that is the offense like Josh Allen, maybe Lamar Jackson, but the things Ken Dorsey asked Josh Allen to do, the throws he has to make is really unparalleled. And one of my favorite things about him is when they need a big play, you don't have to just rely on his arm. He can get it with his legs, and we saw that in the Dolphins game, 44-yard run, which put the Bills in prime position to score a touchdown to take the lead and eventually win the game. And I think very few quarterbacks have that ability to go get a bucket with their arms and their legs reliably. So again, I think the Bills have done a great job building the team, building the offense around Josh Allen and scheming him. And I don't think any player kind of represents their team more than Josh Allen.
Yeah, being a Bills fan, I'm glad to hear that it's not a long lost narrative, because I see the amount of comments that I've seen, because when I made the video regarding the Tua Jalen Hurts thing, I was referring to Josh Allen and Mahomes simply because of how much they provide to their offense, and they really encompass value to their offense individually. And people were saying, "Oh, Josh Allen has one of the, has a great offensive supporting cast," and Mahomes says Travis Kelce, blah blah blah. It's like I don't think people truly. You have to watch the games truthfully to understand what these guys are going through on a week-to-week basis. I mean, Ken Dorsey has been solid in his first year, has had his bumps and bruises along the way, but it really is an offense at points that lives and dies by the playmaking of Josh Allen. And we saw the lulls that we did because I think Josh Allen was. I think he was getting in his own head. He was playing superhero ball and started to doubt his own capabilities to an extent and what throw he could and couldn't make. And I think the injury played into that. But it really does live and die by Josh. And we've seen that time and time again. So yeah, I'm glad that it's not long lost outside the Bills fan base. That's really the reality of things. And even for Mahomes, I mean, we were just started talking about what he does for that team. So Pokemon says Hill. Hill, because the only reason Miami is winning. Jordan Poyer. I think the Bills are like 10-0, 11-0 with Jordan Poyer still. So that is a pretty solid statistic. Although I think there's other credit to be given there, but still a very important player. And the 49ers defense. If a unit could win it, I think the 49ers defense probably would be it. The way that they're carrying Brock Purdy. And on that note, I guess I'll ask you. Do you think that the 49ers are still Super Bowl contenders despite the fact that they'll be riding with Brock the rest of the way?
Yeah, I do think they are contenders. Their defense is, like you said, very, very good. Obviously, they had the one bad game against the Chiefs, but, almost every defense has played bad versus the Chiefs. So I will give them like a pass there. But I think Purdy gives you a higher ceiling than Jimmy, especially because of his mobility. And just like on the very small sample size, he has a higher ceiling than Jimmy G, but he also has a lower floor. So you're kind of playing with fire with Purdy. You don't really know what he is. And I mean, the fact that he's already gotten hurt, it's not that great of a sign, but I mean, he had a long week to kind of recover from that. But with Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, McCaffrey, like they have the infrastructure, they have a good offensive line to support him. Shanahan, if there's any coach that will get more out of their average quarterback, it is Kyle Shanahan. And like almost every bad quarterback has had their production and efficiency rise playing under Shanahan. So I think the 49ers are definitely still Super Bowl contenders. I definitely see them if they get Jimmy G back, or even with Purdy as the second or at worst third best team in the NFC. And I think they can easily go on a Super Bowl run if everything goes right in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that'll be a big part of it. Who they match up against in the postseason, I think will have a lot to do with the success that we see this team have. I'm not necessarily sold on the Purdy train yet, just because I feel like we really haven't seen him in a high pressure situation. Of course, coming in unforeseen circumstances, being Mr. Irrelevant, the third stringer, these are all very difficult expectations to try and meet, especially considering how well they were playing to begin with. But I just feel like he's been very, mobile, like you mentioned. He does provide a higher ceiling than Jimmy. He's not going to get sacked the second his first read is taken away. But at the same time, I also feel like he hasn't elevated this offense in a matter of, when he's really needed to as an individual. Most of the time, he'll escape the pocket, he'll find a check down, or he'll escape the pocket and he'll run with it. It's never been a drop back to pass, throw something over the middle that I think was, a relatively tighter window, or in a 3rd and 13, 3rd and 14 type of situation, because he really hasn't had to. I think he had that one good throw his first week starting to Ayuk, which wasn't even, in my opinion, a good throw, if you know what I'm talking about. Ayuk just ran a beautiful route and got lost behind the secondary of whoever they were playing. But I just feel like we haven't seen him in a truly high 10 situation where he needs to drop back and make a play. I mean, I'm not saying he can't do it, but until I see it, I guess I'm a little bit cautious to say that they still can go on that Super Bowl run. But it'll be very, very contingent on who they match up with in the NFC, because they very easily can see a couple of relatively weaker opponents and be in the NFC Championship game. So it'll be fun to see how they do. And I'm rooting for him. I mean, how do you not root for a guy like Brock Purdy? I mean, the story is awesome. My second question for you is, and this is an interesting one, and it was asked earlier by Pokemon, but he said, should Bill Belichick, after the recent events, what's going on this season, and the lacking meeting of expectations for Patriots fans at least, do you think he should be on the hot seat to some extent?
I don't. I think, to me, the Patriots have outperformed expectations.
100%.
Again, I don't know what fans are kind of expecting with Mac Jones. I think the only reason he would be on the hot seat is hiring Matt Patricia and Joe Judge to run the offense.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think his coaching has been, at a better level than we've ever seen. At one point, the Patriots had the number one defense per efficiency, the number one pass defense per efficiency in the NFL this year. So again, I'm not gonna, fault Bill Belichick too much here. Was hiring two defensive coordinators and a defensive coordinator and a special teams coach to run the offense a bad move? Probably, but the NFL is a who type of league, right? And again, if he thought Patricia and Judge were suited to run the offense, then I can't really judge him because he's the best coach of all time, probably the greatest football mind of all time. So I don't think you can be on the hot seat, because if you fire Bill Belichick, I would say at least 25 teams should be picking up the phone to call him. And I don't think that's an over exaggeration.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's almost like a Tom Brady thing. It's like, if Tom Brady was available, although I feel like I did hear that not many teams were calling his line. But anyway, it's like one of those things where it doesn't matter how old he is, what his track record has looked like over the last couple of years without Brady, you're calling him. You're going to give him whatever he wants to try and get him to go to your team. But I agree. Once again, we've been on the same page all night. But Bill Belichick I think they've outperformed expectations, and I had them at 5-12 this year. I think was my projection, and they're already at 7 wins, somewhat in the playoff race, which I think they're going to slowly slip out. But they could have easily won that game against the Raiders and been 8-6. So this is a football team that has basically no true star-studded talent. They have Judon. I don't think Judon is anything more than just a solid finisher that benefits from a good secondary. But he still does his job. Josh Uche is, probably outperforming expectations at this point. And then you have an offense with a game manager type quarterback that apparently can't throw 55 yards, throwing to a bunch of mediocre weapons. So I just don't know what Patriots fans were kind of expecting from this team this season. But I've been seeing their fan base have a big ass meltdown because they're not necessarily in a playoff spot, which I just can't imagine how you ever expect them to be. The only thing I would say about Belichick is maybe, that the coach Bill Belichick shouldn't be fired or investigated. I think what might have to change is Bill Belichick's role in making decisions as far as, draft picks go, or who they, pay money to in the offseason, who they hire is on the coaching staff. Maybe his say in those regards should be kind of tuned down a little bit. Because I would say over the last couple of years, it's been, the questionable moves are starting to add up. And most of the issues derive from, I would say, roster construction at this point. So, this Patriots team, given a couple more big names, could be a lot better than they are right now, even if Mac Jones is the quarterback. So I would say the GM, Bill Belichick, should be on the hot seat, but the head coach, I think he's, like you said, having an exceptional year. All right, so we'll move on to the third and final question I have for you. And this is for the Dallas Cowboy people out there. Are the Cowboys once again in line for another first-round exit?
So I'm going to assume they play the Bucs in round 1, because obviously they're going to be the 5th seed, and Bucs are probably going to win the NFC South. Yep. And I don't think they'll exit the first round this year. I just every week I ask myself this question when I look at the Bucs and the betting lines and everything, what are the Bucs good at this year? And I don't have an answer, because I don't think they're good at anything. They can't run the ball. Their defense is kind of not performed up to their standards. Although I think they had a pretty good game against the Bengals on defense in the second half. They couldn't, overcome bad field position from their offense. I don't think the Bucs are suited this year to take advantage of the Cowboys. And I think the only issue I have I have 3 issues with the Cowboys. And in order, I'll start with, I think their run defense is very susceptible. It was a big point for me in the offseason that they don't have good interior defensive linemen. And you can, if they had to play from behind, I don't think they're able to stop the run. And we saw that the Jaguars averaged 7 yards a carry against the Cowboys, got killed by these jet sweeps. Part of that is because they don't have a good interior defensive line. The other part is because their edge group is kind of light, and they play with speed instead of power. And so when you run outside the hashes, I think they get I think the Cowboys defense struggles a little bit. And now they don't have reliable cornerbacks after Trayvon Diggs. Both Anthony Brown and their slot cornerback, who I forget his name, got hurt. And so they're starting guys like Deron Bland, who are like practice squad guys, and you can take advantage of them, right? And good offenses like the Eagles, like the 49ers, who have multiple good receivers, can take advantage of them. And then finally, it's not that big of an issue for me, but I still think it's a cause for concern, is their second receiver. After CeeDee Lamb, like, who are you throwing the ball to, right? Like, Michael Gallup has underperformed this year after getting a pretty good contract in this offseason. Noah Brown at his best is a wide receiver 3. I know they signed T.Y. Hilton, but like, how much are we expecting him to produce, right? So I have some questions about this Cowboys team in general on both sides of the ball, but I think Dak's playing at a pretty high level. Their run game is working pretty well. And, you know, again, Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence can kind of take over a game anytime they want to. So I still think they beat the Bucs in round 1, but after that, it's kind of up in the air.
Yeah, I like how you didn't mention Dak. I think Dak has been catching an unwarranted amount of heat. He has thrown 7 picks in 4 games, but he's still, you know, this offense is still scoring. They're still moving down the field at an efficient rate. And right now, I would say that the powerhouse side of things for the Cowboys, if you will, at the beginning of the year was their defense. And, you know, they were supposed to be one of the better defenses in the NFL. And the biggest reason why everybody considered them a true contender in that conference was because they were finally pairing this high-powered, high-motored offense to this very strict, very, you know, stubborn defense. And now that is once again kind of reverting, and this defense is struggling. I mean, the offense, despite a couple, you know, poor miscues, you know, they're still playing at a high level. So I think Dak's getting thrown under the bus a little bit here as somewhat of a scapegoat for from some Cowboys fans. You know, but still, I think Dallas, you know, like you said, could very easily be exposed on the defensive side of the ball in many different respects. I've always liked Michael Gallup. I think it's his knee. Honestly, I've always thought he was one of the best high point receivers in the NFL. The dude can get up. He can jump. He can pluck and he can jump. So I really like Michael Gallup, but it just doesn't seem like he's got much separation ability at this point. And Noah Brown's nothing. So it's really going to live and die by I think, you know, setting up the run game, getting Dak going through the air, and then hopefully they can score enough points to get the job done. And their defense maybe has a couple sacks or 2 that seals the deal. But they're definitely not looking like the true powerhouse they were earlier in the season, at least.
Yeah.
All right. So that covers those 3 questions. We'll get into the underdog of the week, and then we'll get into the quiz game. So my underdog pick of the week that I have for this upcoming slate, every week I try to end up picking the underdog I pick on the show, but sometimes I end up changing it. Last week, I took the Steelers, and then I changed it because Mitch was starting, and I didn't know that. And then they still won. So that was annoying. So this week, I'm going to actually try and stick with it. And my underdog pick is going to be the Texans. They're plus 5.5 against the Titans, who are on a little bit of a downward swing here. And the Texans have been playing teams tough, teams that they shouldn't be playing tough, very tough, with the 2-man quarterback system between Jeff Driscoll and Davis Mills, which, I mean, who would have thought? I feel like I'm watching, you know, somebody trolling play Madden, but it's a real NFL offense, and it's seemingly working with pretty much Chris Moore and Jordan Akins to throw to, and no Dameon Pierce. Who would have thought that this is an offense that could score the way they have lately? But I think this is a prime spot for them. Divisional game against a team that's struggling in the Titans. You know, Derrick Henry a couple weeks ago ran for, I think, like 150 and 2 touchdowns against the Jaguars, yet they still got outscored by 20 points. So clearly that whole idea, if you will, is not necessarily getting them by like it has in the past. So this is easily a game that I have no reason believing that the Texans couldn't win. So that's my pick of the week. I didn't really see anything else in the schedule that stuck out to me, though. This was the biggest one, as sad as it may sound. But was there anything on the schedule that you came across that you thought had some upset potential?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I still like the Eagles. The line got up to plus 6 earlier today, and I took a little bit of that, even though I got some really bad closing line value on my Eagles +1 and stuff. But one of the things that Vegas, I think in general, has struggled to kind of like account for is backup quarterbacks. And Gardner Minshew, like we talked about earlier, is one of those above average backup quarterbacks in the NFL this year. And I think from just strictly a betting perspective, I thought 6 points was too much. I still think 4.5 is a lot. And I could still see the Eagles kind of like winning outright in this game. because they still have a run game to take advantage of the Cowboys' run defense. They still have AJ Brown and Devontae Smith to take advantage of whoever Trayvon Diggs is not covering, right? And Gardner Minshew again is not a bad quarterback. Like he can get the ball to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, and the Eagles defense is like pretty good. So I still think the Eagles, while they aren't the better team without Jalen Hurts, I still think they can put up a fight, and I think they could potentially cover and even still win outright with Gardner Minshew in this game.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, this is a team that has pretty much not. What game have they seemed human in? I mean, I think this game against the Bears, they did at points. Jalen Hurts started out slow, but otherwise, I mean, every game it seems like they are the better team. Drive after drive, both sides of the ball, they dominate in the trenches. They obviously Jalen Hurts was the dominator on the ground this past week, but there's nothing stopping them lining up Miles Sanders back there. And although he might not be the best, he's still able to run through a hole just like anybody else. Kenneth Gainwell is a good change of pace. I think Dallas Goedert's also going to play this week. And, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, I think. I think Gardner Minshew likes Dallas Goedert a lot. So this could be a game that very easily can go in favor of Philly when everybody's kind of leaning into Dallas with the current circumstances. And, who knows? If this is a game that Dallas loses, then I think there should be some red flags flown, even despite the fact that the Eagles are still a good football team. This is, in my mind, a must-win for a team that I think is really kind of struggling to get some traction based on what's happened over the last few weeks. All right, so we will get right into the final segment of the show, the most anticipated one. This is the Caveman's Quiz Game. I did cover a little bit prior to the show, but I'll go over it once again just to give a quick reminder. The Caveman's Quiz Game goes as follows. There are 5 NFL quiz questions. You get an off-season events question, which is also just kind of transactions in general since then. But a stats question, a history, draft, and awards question. Each question has a difficulty of easy, medium, hard that you get to choose from. Easy is 10, medium is 20, hard is 30. A true-false follow-up question. If you get that question correct, which is worth half the original point value, you get 1 mulligan per game, which you can go back to any category and use. And then a final wager question at the end. And this is what you're going up against. Hansel, he's part of the Bills Mafia community. I had him on, and he killed it with 300 points. Frank, came on and did a pretty decent job if you're familiar with him. So he took the second place spot. He was originally first and then got bumped down. But yeah, this is what the leaderboard is looking like. You feel confident?
Yeah. Let's see how this goes.
All right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people come on here and they kind of doubt their ability to do trivia, and then they end up killing it. So, and other people come on and they're like, I want all the hard questions. I'm going to get them all right. And I say, good luck to you.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll start right off with the off-season events question. Do you want to do the easy, the medium, or the hard?
Let's start off with the medium.
All right. He's going to start off with the medium question. And the medium question is this. Where did former Cowboys offensive lineman La'el Collins sign this offseason?
That would have to be the Cincinnati Bengals.
You are correct. It is the Cincinnati Bengals. So that's 20 points on the board right off the bat. The follow-up true-false question is this. He was drafted by the Giants in 2015. True or false?
Huh. I'm going to say that's false.
You're right. It is false. He was drafted by Dallas and it's only played for Dallas ever since.
Good.
Did that just so randomly just confuse you?
Yeah, because I do remember he had some off-field issues coming out of college. I was wondering if that stemmed after he got drafted, but I think the Cowboys are the type of team to kind of bypass those off-field issues as we've seen with some of their draft picks. So yeah, kind of why I went false.
No, yeah, you got it right. You are 30 points on the board, so a good start. We'll get into the second question category, which is the stats category. Do you want the easy, the medium, or the hard?
Let's go with the hard for this one.
All right, he's going to go with the hard. The stats hard question is this. Who are the top 3 passing leaders for Week 15?
Okay, Kirk Cousins, definitely number 1.
Yep. They don't have to be in order.
Oh, yeah. So Kirk Cousins is one of them. Mahomes is another. And I'm going to go with Justin Herbert as another.
It was not Justin Herbert. It was Trevor Lawrence actually threw for 318 against the Cowboys in his comeback, and that was the third highest passer. But Justin Herbert was right up there. Zach Wilson, ironically enough, was second behind Trevor Lawrence there with 317. But although that number does, how do I feel like that does sound right? I swear I triple checked it, but I just want to check it one more time that it wasn't Herbert. But I'm pretty positive it was Trevor Lawrence with 318. So Justin Herbert had 313. Okay, so yeah,
Okay. Very close.
Very close. Trevor Lawrence
Yeah.
had 318. Wilson had 317. Hurts had 315, and Herbert had 313. Brady had 312. Wow, what the hell? What an interesting week for 310s.
Yeah.
Passing yards. But yeah, you were close. It was pretty much kind of a toss-up for that third one. I figured Cousins and Mahomes would come to mind, but that's all right. Do you want to use the mulligan here? Or do you want to use it or hold on to it for a different category? Or you can go.
I'll hold on to it.
All right, he's going to hold on to it. So we'll get into question number 3. This is the history question. Do you want the easy, the medium, or the hard?
Let's go with the medium for this one.
All right, he's going to go back to the medium. The medium question is, what team was the victim in the iconic moment 1 yard short in Super Bowl 34?
That would be the Tennessee Titans.
You are correct. It is the Tennessee Titans. So that's another 20 points. So that is 50 now. The following true false is the opposing team was the 49ers. True or false?
That is false. I think it is the Rams.
You're right. It was the Rams. So that's another 10. So you're up to 60. You killed that one without any hesitation at all. So good job. So you're up to 60 points after 3 questions. A pretty solid start. And we'll get into the 4th question. This is the draft question. Do you want to go the easy, medium, or the hard?
Let's go with hard for this one.
All right, he's going to go hard. The hard draft question is this. Who was the first wide receiver off the board in the 2020 NFL draft?
That would be Mr. Henry Ruggs.
You're right. It was Henry Ruggs. No hesitation at all. 90 points now after that 30 bomb. The following true false is this. He was taken outside the top 10. Is that true or false?
Yes, that is true.
You are correct. He was taken. It was the 12th overall selection that Henry Ruggs was taken. So you got that one as well. That moves you up to 105 points on the day with 2 more questions remaining if you include the mulligan, and then 3 with the wager. So you're looking at you're in a pretty good spot right now. The awards question, do you want the easy, the medium, or the hard?
Let's go with hard for this one.
All right, he's going back to the hard. The hard awards question is this. Out of last year's award winners, A-Rod, Cup, Watt, Jamar, Parsons, Burrow, Vrabel, who was the only one out of that bunch to win unanimously?
Okay, I know it wasn't Rodgers. I know it wasn't Cup. Could be Watt. I don't think it was Jamar. Burrow and Vrabel definitely had some contender. I think Parsons was so good. I don't think there was anyone else that really came close to him. Maybe Surtain, but Parsons put up too many stats. I'm gonna go with Parsons for this one.
Once again, you got it. It is Micah Parsons. So that's another 30 points. Before we elaborate on it, true or false? The closest race was the Coach of the Year award. Is that true or false?
I forget who the race came down to. I'm gonna go with false.
You are right. It is false. The Comeback Player of the Year award was the closest race between Burrow and Dak. Burrow walked away with a 28-21 victory, but that is another correct answer. So that's another 15 points, and that'll move you up to 150 if my math does not do me wrong, which it has in the past, but I'm pretty positive we're correct there. 150 points with the mulligan left. Which category do you want to go back to? Got the stats, history, off-season events, awards, and that was it. Draft.
Let's do the off-season one.
All right, going back to the off-season events. Do you want the hard question?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Hard off-season events question is this. This AFC West offensive tackle turned down a huge contract this offseason just to then get franchise tagged. Now this year has not been great. Who is it?
Yeah, this one rings the bell. It has to be Orlando Brown Jr. for the Chiefs.
It is Orlando Brown. I feel like Ben might have given a little bit too much context there, but yeah, Orlando Brown is the correct answer. So that'll move you to 180 on the day. And the true false follow-up is this. At this time that he was offered the contract, it would have made Orlando the highest paid offensive lineman. True or false?
The offer was like 6 years, 100. I think it was like 130. I think the offer was like $23 million or something. So I'm gonna say true.
Yeah, you're right. True, it is.
Yeah.
I don't know the number off the top of my head, I'm being honest, but yeah, it was true. I know that much. So Orlando Brown Jr. is the correct answer. You get the true false right. That brings you up to 195 points, which may very well be a record through the first first six questions. So you just absolutely murdered it. And you have the wager left. And let me get the stupid thing off the screen. This is what the leaderboard is. That's not it. This is the leaderboard. So you have 195. That puts you currently in fourth. So you can wager however many you want to try and make your push here.
Yeah, I mean, so 195. All I need is like 110 something to be in first. So gotta go big or go home. So I'm not gonna wager everything. But I'll wager 110. So that would put me in first if I get the question right.
All right, so he's going to wager 110 points. That'll move down to 85, but with the correct answer, he very easily will take over the number one spot. And the wager question for 110 points is going to be this. Who was the only kicker drafted in the 2022 NFL Draft?
I gotta say, being on Twitter gives me the answer to this question because this was all over Twitter during the Saturday games, but this has to be Mr. Cade York from the Cleveland Browns.
You are correct. It is Cade York. So that moves your overall running total to 195 plus 110 to a whopping 305 points, if I do say so myself. So congratulations, man. You came in and absolutely made my quiz game look like a child's playground, man. That was pretty awesome. You did a good job. I mean, every single answer, like you didn't know one of them, but every single other one you did not hesitate. You knew each one. So that was pretty awesome. Good job.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty sick. So thank you, man, for taking the time to hop on tonight. Congratulations once again, and we had a lot of solid conversation.
Yeah, again, really appreciate you having me on. Happy to be in first in the leaderboard. Hopefully that sticks around for a while. But yeah, it was great talking well and chopping up.
Yeah, for sure, man. Once again, thank you for taking the time. Be sure you guys are checking out his social media. All of the social media links down in the description below. Obviously, as you just witnessed, very smart dude. So be sure you're following him on Twitter, reading up on his articles. He does a lot of the betting stuff over at PFF. So be sure you're catching all of those articles that he releases. So once again, thank you for hopping on. Thank you to anybody that was dropping comments tonight and participating in the show that just dropped a view, like, subscription. But as always, I'll see you guys next week, and go Bills.